you doing? This is Coffee Break with Jimmy. Yesterday I did a podcast talk a little bit about the Insurrection Act and if President Trump should happen to or need to, in fact, invoke the Insurrection Act. And I think maybe after today, I guess there's still protests going on. Now, this is something else I'd like to talk a little bit about. There's a couple things I want to mention here. Just not too much, but the word protest, I've always understood that we could peacefully protest, right? Well, it's not written that way in the Constitution. The Constitution actually says you can peacefully assemble, okay, to where you have, freedom of speech. This is all part of the First Amendment. So you can peacefully assemble. But everyone, this is kind of the word that everyone uses now. You can peacefully protest, which actually, or they could just say protest. You can protest. And in that manner, if you say, well, you have the right to protest. Well, if you have the right to protest, that almost gives you the right to be violent in your protest, like what they're doing in Minnesota right now. They're actually, running cars into other cars to stop the ICE agents and stop them from doing what they have to do there in Minnesota. So that's kind of like protesting of sorts, I guess. But that's more violent. That's violent protesting. Throwing rocks or bottles of water or whatever items they want to throw at the ICE agents or whoever. This is kind of a form of protesting, right? Well, that's actually illegal. In the Constitution, it says you can peacefully assemble, okay? Now, even President Trump said that in January 6th of 2021, where he said everyone's going to go down and peacefully protest. Well, he meant peacefully protest. Peacefully protest. That's what he said. But in the Constitution, it doesn't have the word protest at all, I don't believe. Now, you can double check me on that and correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe the word protest is actually used in the Constitution. So what's going on there in Minnesota, these peacefully protests, where none of them are peaceful, okay, and they are protests, but they're more violent. They're instigations. There are instigators, I should say, that are protesting, that are doing some. I mean, come on, they ripped off a box out of one of the ICE agents' cars with their weapons in it that was locked in their car, and they ripped them off. They put a strap around it and pull it out of the car, and they're doing all kinds of stuff. And now Waltz and was it Jacob France or what was it, France or Freeze or whatever it is, the mayor of Minneapolis. They're telling them to go ahead and then film everything that you see. Get your camera out and film this, and protest in this way, which again, I don't believe protest is in the Constitution. It's peacefully assemble, and I think that's the way it's written. You could check that out yourself in the Constitution to see if that in fact is true, and I think it is. But anyhow, so this I believe he should invoke the Insurrection Act, because now Tim Walz, the governor of Minnesota, is talking about enacting the National Guard there, Minnesota National Guard. And if you're going to enact the National Guard against our federal people, our ICE agents, or whoever, and invoke that is insurrection in itself, right there. That's he's committing insurrection right there against our federal law officers. Now, I don't understand why they just can't, and maybe they don't want to have another George Floyd. And I think this Derek Chauvin, I think he should get a pardon. I don't think he's guilty. I don't think he ever was guilty. I think George Floyd died on his own volition. He actually overdosed. But now they made him a national martyr, I guess. I don't know. But I think Derek Chauvin should get a pardon. But but that's what's going on. It's been going on in Minnesota for a long time. They've been letting them get away with this stuff, letting them get away with these protests, which are violent, more violent than anything. And now Tim Walz apparently, now I don't know, he hasn't done it yet, but apparently he wants to enact the National Guard there, Minnesota National Guard, to go against our federal ICE agents and against the FBI and whoever else we have out there from the federal law, from the law. You can't do that. That's an insurrection, okay? So we'll see what happens there. But we talked about this a little bit yesterday. And there's something else I wanted to mention too. I guess it's called the SAVE Act, okay? That's before Congress right now. I don't know much about it, but apparently the SAVE Act, that's before the House of Representatives. I might be before the Senate. I'm not too sure. But the SAVE Act is what they want: one-day voting. And you have to have proper ID, legal ID, one-day voting. And, so that's what this SAVE Act, apparently, somewhere along those lines, it's about voting. And I guess when Donald Trump, he tried to get this passed before, apparently they said he had no standing because the vote count wasn't in yet. Well, the vote count, what this SAVE Act is all about. It's about the Vote Act. It's about properly voting one day, proper identification. And I think this would end a lot of the fraudulent voting, where they do this, this harvesting of the votes here, especially here in California. They've been doing that forever, the harvesting of the votes here. It would end all that. Now, if you're in the military, or if you're incapacitated where you can't go to a voting booth and provide proper identification, then you can get mail-in voting. But you have to have it done in a certain amount of time. And you can't just send it in anytime you want. So, but they would still have some sort of mail-in voting for that sort of thing. But that's what they call the SAVE Act, and that's before Congress right now. So I don't want to really dance around that too much right now because I don't know a whole lot what's going on with that. This is something I just found out about not too long ago. But they said they couldn't. They couldn't pass that before when President Trump tried to get this passed before because the voting hadn't been completed yet. So they had no standing. The courts came in, these liberal judges came in and said, you have no standing on that because the vote count is, well, that's what this is all about, the vote. So he would have standing if it in fact wasn't that sort of thing. But now that we're not voting right now, there's no vote count they got to worry about. So I believe that's why they're doing it now, the SAVE Act, and they're running it through Congress right now. So we'll see what happens there. But this insurrection, I think it should be enacted by the president, and they should go into Minnesota. And of course, we all know this, as that all this you want to call protesting. It's not peacefully assembling. Okay, it's not peacefully assembling. That's what's in the Constitution. That's just protest, and it's violent protest. They've been doing this to cover up all the fraud that's going on in Minnesota, from $8 to $9 billion. Okay, to that. And Ilhan Omar, she's. I mean, I think she's a big part of that. So is Tim France, and so is the mayor. This Jacob France, the mayor of Minneapolis. A lot of heads are going to roll. That's why Tim Walz won't run for governor again. But I believe that's what it's all about. Okay, so let's see what happens here with this insurrection. If in fact the president does invoke the Insurrection Act, and let's see what happens on this SAVE Act, which is before Congress right now. This about, and it's all about voting, about having proper identification and one-day voting, maybe paper ballots. There might be a few more things that are in that. We'll have to wait and see what that's all about. But like I said, I just heard about that. But check this out yourself, and check it out, please. Check out the Constitution and see if it says it at all. If it says protest, and we have the right to peacefully protest or protest at all. If protest is mentioned in the Constitution at all, I believe it says peacefully assemble. So check that out. So anyhow, I guess that's a couple of things to look up and to check out. And please comment on this. you know, and let me know what you think. Okay. So this is Coffee Break with Jimmy. Please subscribe, hit that notification bell, so next time I'm on, we can keep in touch with one another. And please, send me some comments, okay? And share. Thank you. We'll see you next time.